more on the sacred cow of vaccines. What most people don't know about the father of vaccination, and why history is repeating itself. By Dave Mihalovic. For centuries, as medical practitioners, we have tried to find ways of inducing immunity in order to escape the consequences of disease, but vaccination itself is relatively new, and a mere blip on our historical timeline. It embraces noble intention, which is why so many are easily deceived regarding its true effectiveness. Dr. Edward Jenner is considered the father of vaccination variolation, or inoculation. He was the pioneer of the first smallpox vaccine, and he was also the first to formulate a vaccine for approved experimentation, which began with his own 10-month-old son. Can I just insert here, the above-mentioned noble intention, and how so many are easily deceived is likely said using our natural religious tendencies, installed by evolution, to believe in something without question, to march into hell, for a heavenly cause. It certainly seems most people believe vaccines cannot be questioned. It's such a noble cause. I will only remind the reader that there has never been an atheist society in the history of man, but we will always take some things on faith because it seems noble. It's in our nature. Very forgivable, but the belief still can be technically false, but defended with unthinking religious vigor by eminent figures. Now it's back to Dave Mihalovic. So just who was Edward Jenner? Modern vaccination practices appear to have their pathogenesis in the work of Edward Jenner. As a boy, Jenner was himself subjected to abusive methods of variolation, where the scabs of smallpox victims were applied to open wounds inflicted by the administrators such as the local apothecary. Despite a 75% survival rate for natural smallpox infections, there were no cures. The cures of those days were barbaric and poisonous, likely killing as many people as smallpox itself. Variolation or inoculation was the method first used in an attempt to immunize an individual against smallpox, variola, with material taken from a patient or a recently variolated individual, in the hope that a mild but protective infection would result. The procedure was most commonly carried out by inserting/rubbing powdered smallpox scabs or fluid from pustules into superficial scratches made in the skin. Smallpox, after all, no matter how mild it may be in a specific case, was still highly contagious, and those infected by someone with a mild case might still themselves develop a serious or fatal case. On the average, a given case of smallpox probably resulted in contagion to 2 to 5 other persons, usually family or friends. Furthermore, some people recognize that the practice of variolation not only increased the incidence and prevalence of the disease in England, but that the practice had also probably increased the severity of the disease. In fact, later it was confirmed through statistical analysis that well-vaccinated patients in London and Glasgow experienced the most deaths due to being vaccinated compared to those who were not. Because of these beliefs, variolation was made illegal for a time in mid-century. Across the Channel in France, it was also eventually made illegal in England in 1840, well after Jenner's experiment, when it was enacted that any person who shall produce in any person, by inoculating with variolous matter, or by willful exposure to variolous matter, or willfully by any other means whatsoever, produce the disease of smallpox in any person, shall be liable to be proceeded against and shall, upon conviction, be imprisoned in the common jail, or house of correction, for a time not exceeding 1 month. In 1789, Jenner decided, just after he had been elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society, to try immunizing, or what he thought was immunizing, his 10-month-old son, Edward Jr., and 2 of his neighbor's servants, by inoculating them with swinepox. He had learned well from his famous teacher, Dr. John Hunter, that one will learn more by trying the experiment rather than by just speculating about it. So Jenner performed the experiment by making a small scratch on the servant and the baby's arms with a lancet, and then infecting the scratch with matter from a pustule of the baby's nurse, who had caught the swine-pox infection. 8 days later baby Edward took sick and developed sores, but he did eventually recover. Then, 2 years later, Jenner again challenged his son with smallpox again, this time with unhappy results. This time there was a reaction, and a severe one, but he quickly recovered, and a year later Jenner inoculated him with smallpox once again. Unfortunately, however, in the years following these experiments, young Edward became a sickly child and exhibited signs of mild mental retardation, likely due to neurological damage. Jenner also inoculated a young boy named James Phipps. Both Phipps and Jenner's son died at ages 20 and 21, respectively, from tuberculosis, which has been linked to the smallpox vaccine. Despite these deaths, Jenner continued testing this vaccine on many others, producing varying results, such as vaccine-induced smallpox and vaccine-induced tuberculosis. Jenner, in 1798, formulated a new vaccine, which combined horse grease and cowpox matter, and he had proclaimed his first formulation, in 1796, as having no protective virtue. His new vaccine was met with public disdain and disgust, and his experiments failed. He was ridiculed. Jenner then returned to promote his original formulation. By 1807, he convinced the Royal College of Physicians and the British Parliament that his once defunct and admittedly unprotective vaccine was safe and effective, and as well could produce large revenues. Not trusting the scientific solutions being offered, some countries banned variolation. Yet, quite surprisingly, Jenner's vaccine became compulsory and mandatory. In many other countries, the smallpox vaccine was widely used until 1979, when the World Health Organization, WHO, declared smallpox eradicated from the face of the earth. And vaccination pseudoscience continues to this very day. Jenner's legacy promulgated the vaccine frenzy of modern times. Vaccines are so praised and glorified that they are often given the title of the sacred cow of modern medicine, and defended with zealous and concerted might by public health organizations and pharmaceutical companies. This pseudo-ritualistic worship of the sacred cow has ruined the careers of doctors who dare question it, and jailed parents who have refused mandatory vaccinations. There are also many well-documented cases of children who have been killed by vaccines, where the parents are charged, and in some cases, convicted of murdering their children. A cursory glance at the government's Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System database shows thousands upon thousands of deaths and disorders associated with vaccines, and the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, admits this only represents at best 10% of the actual occurrences of adverse vaccine reactions. The sacred cow is a false deity, and a harsh demon indeed. The vaccine agenda is built on a myth. One of the greatest lies you will ever hear is that vaccination programs caused the decline of childhood diseases in the 20th century. This is complete fiction. The truth is well documented that these rates declined by 90% before the introduction of mass/routine vaccination campaigns. Vaccines had no effect on infectious disease in the past 200 years. When we compare the natural infectious disease declines versus the vaccination effectiveness dangers, there is clearly evidence that vaccines did not save humanity from infectious disease. John V. McKinley and Sonia McKinley demonstrated how questionable the contribution of medical measures were on the decline of mortality in the 20th century. There is an abundance of irrefutable evidence showing that the historical application of vaccines had no health benefit or impact on the prevention of infectious disease. This evidence is shown in different countries, and the World Health Organization was forced to concede that sanitation, better hygiene, and antibiotics are the main reason disease mortality and morbidity have declined. This is what most people don't know about the father of vaccination, and why history is repeating itself. Can I just reinsert here? The above-mentioned noble intention is likely seducing our natural religious tendencies, installed by evolution, to believe in something without question, to march into hell for a heavenly cause. It certainly seems most people believe vaccines cannot be questioned. It's such a noble cause. I will only remind the reader that there has never been an atheist society in the history of man. But we will always take some things on faith because it seems noble. It's in our nature, very forgivable. But the belief still can be technically false, but defended with unthinking religious vigor by eminent figures, hence this finale statement by the author. Despite overwhelming evidence, proponents of the sacred cow continually covet this accomplishment as their own. Realizing that this deception is the rock of the sacred cow church is essential in seeing the myth and hypocrisy of vaccines.